This podcast is a part of the More Podcast Network.
Brad, we are at the end of the year, man. We're literally
did it.
in December. We made it. Yeah, we did. We did. Did you think at the beginning of the year, I guess, what did you think at the beginning of the year is what I want to ask. Like, hey, we are podcast. I tell people we have a podcast now. That, ooh, we have a podcast. I'm like, well, you're maybe making it a bigger deal than I feel like it really is. But I mean, what? Like, hey, congrats, we made it. We said we wanted to film an episode a week. We've done that. We made it. We're awesome. We're awesome. Did I just say that? I did.
Yeah, you did.
But I'm going to pat us on the back. Yeah, we made it. How are you feeling about it? What are your thoughts, man? Year one.
Okay, so word to the wise. Starting a podcast is a lot of work. I mean, it's a lot of work.
No.
Big time.
So you're saying there's a reason most podcasts fail quickly. Is that
Absolutely.
what you're saying?
Yeah. It was more expensive and it was a lot more work than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
And it generated less leads, activity, sales than I expected it to. So the utility of the podcast from a business standpoint, not what I had hoped for, but the meaning and joy derived from doing it, much more than what I expected.
Yeah.
It's actually been a lot of fun for me. It's probably been one of the most fun, like, work business projects I've ever done.
Yeah. So, I mean, and we should unpack that a little bit because as much as we've, hoped that we get to, because we love partnering with people and coaching and hope that leads would come from this. I mean, the heart and the intention behind it was kind of I say content creator, but it really was get in front of incredible leaders, learn what they do, and help other people do that. I think because that was the goal, and because leads weren't necessarily the goal, or like, hey, I need X amount of coaching clients or whatever.
It was secondary.
Yeah, I mean, it was a hope, but I think the point is that the value is there more so at the moment, like intrinsically than monetarily, right? Like
totally,
there's depth in what we have learned this year, and it is hard. It has been hard. Has been a lot of work. Like has put strain on. I don't know about our relationship's been pretty good, but we've had to ask our wives to, step up.
I haven't felt strained with you at all, other than just the normal, it's
every
you
day
being you. I mean, that I can't change.
You want to expand on that for our listeners?
No, I do not.
Okay.
It's not appropriate for this particular podcast, but I would be happy to record another one where I do expand on what's wrong with you in general.
That's going to be in the deep, dark web. Is that where that's going to be?
Yeah.
My list of long and distinguished problems.
Right.
You and Janelle would have a lot of fun with that, I think.
Why don't you interview Janelle and I on how you need to change? That would make for great listening.
Okay. Yeah. Do we get to do the same thing?
That. No, it is not reciprocal.
Good.
This is a one-way invitation.
Yeah. Just want to make sure. All right. So we learned starting a podcast, not easy.
Not easy, but fun. Super fun.
Yep. Fun. B, not necessarily a giant moneymaker. So if you are looking to get into podcasting and you're like, hey, I got this idea for a podcast, it could be. The question would be,
it could be.
If your podcast is not an overnight success, not saying ours is not, with our 363 subscribers on YouTube. I don't know how many we have on iTunes or podcasts.
I always forget to check.
Here and Spotify. I do too. But if it is not an overnight success, or if you did it for a year and you had, I don't want to say nominal results, but not like, kick you in the teeth. That's amazing. Can't believe we had so many subscribers. Is it still worth it? Would it still be worth it to you? I'm just thinking if some of our listeners are,
I love that question,
wanting to start their own podcast. Like, is it still worth it, Brad?
Yeah. I mean, for me, absolutely. As it relates to like my own learning, in just like my personal purpose of developing leaders, irregardless of like the financial outcomes or investment in that, I think definitely. Because, these 52 or so conversations that we've had, I have really learned a lot. Part of that was because I put a lot of preparation into them, and like I came ready to talk to each of them.
Yeah,
But I
you
think
made me
also,
read books and stuff, by the way, just so our listeners
yeah, dude.
know. Like I'm like, cool, we're gonna interview people, and Brad's like, cool, read their book. Cool, read this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. All right. I'm not a fast reader, kind of less dick sick, but I'll make it,
Yeah. Yeah, but like go back to like even like Natalie Bourne, Elizabeth Dixon, Brandon
Yeah.
Schaefer, Corey Shearer, Josiah Gono. Who am I missing? I feel like there's more.
I mean, there's more books in there. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a couple of other authors in addition too. Bill
Yes.
High. I
We even
got
have
like,
up and coming. I mean, Josh Cowsbeak's, writing a book
yes.
currently, at the moment. Like we've got up and coming authors as well.
Yep.
So.
And Shane needs to write a book. I feel like Shane's got a book in him. What's his deal?
He does have a book in him. Yeah. I mean, he's got enough kids that he should write a book.
Yes. Yes.
Should be called what? Should
How
be
to
called.
Dad.
Yeah. They told me to stop after 5.
Right.
But I didn't. That's what it should be called. Yeah.
Yeah, so totally worth it for me. Would definitely go back and do it again. Would probably do some things a little bit differently, a little bit more slowly. I think the video component of our podcast is what really adds to the amount of work and the cost, right? If we weren't doing video, it would be very inexpensive, right? And very easy to do, much more convenient. But I think once you add that video component and you have, like the mics and the lights and the camera, and you have editing and, all of the different video platforms, it's just like, it does add a lot of layers. And
Yeah.
so, maybe I would go, audio only and start like that, as opposed to like, the way we did it, which was just like full bore, like, but honestly, like a lot of that has been super fun to me and super interesting. So, I wouldn't change it.
Yeah.
But if I were going to make changes, if you were like, hey, what would you do differently?
Sure.
I might consider that a little bit. I also think that interviewing others creates some interesting components too, from a scheduling standpoint. Like, if it were you and me, it'd be like, hey, we're going to report, we're going to do podcasts on Thursday at 4 p.m. And it's just, that's going to be our time. But when you start to add in, busy people and leaders running companies and doing things get kind of hectic. So yeah, man, how about you? What do you think?
That's good feedback. Yeah. I mean, yes, totally worth it. Not easy. That is for sure. Time consuming, kind of
Yeah.
a
What was
money.
difficult? Yeah.
I mean, most difficult is you don't usually, I would assume, I would assert, this is my experience and our experience. It's not like we're getting rid of other things while we're starting the podcast. Like, podcast is in addition to your already busy schedule. So,
Indeed.
for me, I'm like, okay, great. We're going to start a podcast. Well, there's probably not a better time to start it. Like, you're not going to be less busy, but at the same time, then you look over the course of a year and you're like, okay, so what happened? Well, I had twins. You had a kid. That's a lot of work. You continue to grow your coaching business. I started my coaching business. That's a lot of work. Like, we just tried to get through the day to day. Mom passed away. Like, there's all these different things, right? Hey, I'm going for a trip to California. Your podcast is typically in addition to, unless somebody's paying you for it. If they are, fantastic. Like if you're on ESPN, good for you. You got people to produce it and do all that. So the amount of time and that I think is the most challenging part, right? To continue to come back to do it well, and there's parts that we probably haven't done so well, but I think we did a good job. And it is constant learning. It is, hey, we're gonna do in person. Okay, great. That's super expensive. Are there other ways that we could do it that we could still get value out of it? Yes, there are. What does that look like? Let's look at Zencaster. Let's look at Riverside. There's all kinds of components in there. But yes, most challenging is, do I care about it enough to sacrifice not knowing my my ROI, and or um, what if my ROI, like that's the question. If my ROI is I get to learn and hang out with a friend of mine, is that enough? Is that enough to sacrifice for? And my answer is yes. My answer is yes. And I love this. I love people development. I love team development. I love chatting with people who've been successful and asking them how did they do it? How would they get there? What would they do differently next time? So yeah, I mean, yeah, I do. I think it is worth it. I think it is great. I think if you're thinking about doing a podcast, that's it. You got to count the cost. Some stat is probably not true, but it's out there on the internet. It's just like, hey, 90% of podcasts don't make it past their like 25th episode, right? For good reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is an interesting thing to like, what's the time horizon on success? So like when we first started this, it was like, well, we're going to do 50, we're going to do a full year of episodes. Like we're just doing it. We just made a commitment. We're going to do a full year of episodes and then reevaluate. And as we were doing some of that with Nikki Dutton, with the More Network, who's kind of been, honestly, Nikki is the reason why this worked, because she was just like, hey, like where's my podcast?
Yeah.
Like you guys owe me a podcast.
Get on it.
And it's like, okay, Nikki. Yeah. Like fair. Like we will deliver a podcast, it was like, that was the deal. You signed up for 52 podcasts, show me the podcast. And, how did we paid Nikki to basically be our podcast trainer, right?
Yeah.
Like, like show up and do the work. Right.
Yeah.
And it was so valuable to make that investment because it was this layer of accountability and layer of quality that I think that we would just not have been able to maintain if we didn't have someone there pushing us along and encouraging us and equipping us and supporting us with all of the kind of the back end details. And all that to say, I think that the time horizon is a really important like layer for thinking about it, because I would love to see, I'm just going to be really interested to see where we are this time next year, right? December, January, 2025, 2026, a year from now. What will have changed? How will things have grown and developed? There's some things that are going to happen that we can't foresee, good, bad, and ugly. And I think that will really shape the sort of product, so to speak, that we're creating. And I think right now, like we have our kind of back end team a little bit more set and solidified in a way that we didn't right on the front end for the first 6 months, especially when we were just figuring out like, how do you even turn the camera on and like, how do you press record on this thing, right? And
yeah. Yep, I remember.
Like I literally recorded episode 4 without video. Like, what the heck?
Yeah.
How did I do that?
I mean, I was going to pivot and say, okay, hey, give me top 2, 3, 4 highlights of the year.
Well, definitely going viral on Instagram with like our third post was like super fun.
Yeah, they really suckered us in.
Yeah, that like we basically got about 6,500 likes and follows or 6,500 followers out of that one post, which just made for a really interesting conversation with like friends and family, because I'd be like, yeah, follow us on Instagram. And they'd be like, did you buy all these followers? And they'd be like, no, I don't know what happened. Like that video just did well. And that to me is just really funny. Like how we basically got like, I don't know, about 8,000 followers out of the year on Instagram, but then we kind of like didn't get more. So like, it was like this massive blow up and then it kind of tapered down slowly and then it just didn't grow at all. And I just think that's really fascinating to me, how like what you just can't control some of those things. You can't control the algorithm. You can't control what people like or don't like. You just have to be authentic and you just have to make something. And so I think like experiencing that like kind of that like peak and drop was actually a really good thing for us to experience on the front end, because it was this little hit of adrenaline of like, oh wow, this is interesting. Like this is like I was getting something out of it right away. But then I had to wrestle with the fact that like, oh, like this isn't going to continue. Like I thought this was how this was gonna. Like I got used to that. It was cool.
We're gonna be at 100,000 tomorrow.
Yeah, we were like, oh, we'll be at like 25,000 followers at this time. Like if we can, it was just total conjecture, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I big fan of that part of it, and also just getting to interview people who are wicked smart. Like I go back to like the Josiah Gono was like episode 2 or 3 maybe, and that was just so much fun to have the opportunity to sit down with someone who's as studied and as excellent as him, and then just person after person getting to learn from who they are and what they know and the experiences that they've had, and to have the opportunity to share that with anyone who's listening is just super fulfilling to me. So definitely have loved like the kind of the algorithm, social media dynamic of things and learning about that. I've loved sitting down and just learning from subject matter experts and people who are out in the wild doing leadership. And then I think that you and I have had a lot of fun. Like I think that we knew we would be good together as a team. But this has definitely been a different environment for us to like try to perform together in. And so I look forward to the day where we can go back to live and we can figure out kind of how we're going to niche our conversations down a little bit, because I feel like we've been about a mile wide this season. And I would love like season 2, season 3 to kind of, just focus us in a little bit more on like, what do Brad and Taylor uniquely bring to the conversation about leadership? And I just don't think we're there yet. Like, I think we just probably need another 50, 100 episodes before we're like, okay, yeah, this is the conversation we want to have. So yeah, I would flip it back to you and ask you the same. Like, what are some, that was 3 for me. So maybe give me 2 or 3 on your end.
Yeah, you did well, Brad. I think those are all great things. Yes, we did have great leaders. Wow. There you are. Yeah. Scratchy throat, man.
Yeah.
End of the day. Yeah, great people, great experience. It has been a good year. Learned a ton. Some of my highlights, Brastrophes or Brad catastrophes. There are a couple highlights there,
Let me just knock my water over right now over my computer.
I mean, just the learning process was fun. Like, hey, we forgot to record the video. All right, that's fun.
Whoops.
Or Robot Brad with Natalie Bourne. That was really fun. Just having.
Oh, she was fun.
I just like, it was just playful and it was fun. We had a lot, tech issues that we're working through and all kinds of stuff. I mean, really just figuring out being playful. I think that all those things were really good. I liked our guests. I thought that was like, what a unique experience to have the amount of CEOs, business owners, young entrepreneurs on the show, to learn from them, to hear about their experience, to pick their brain. I think that's all good. I think the slow burn came out of that, which was a fun segment that we tried this year that people seem to like, which actually goes all the way back to, episode 1, which is still one of my highlights is, you putting me on the hot seat and then us just going and really having no idea what's going on. So I'm going to group that all into number 2.
Well, I had an idea. I mean, I spent a lot of time preparing that. I just didn't tell you anything. So, and this is the perfect example of like the differences between you and I and how we approach certain things, because you walked into that episode like with zero prep, just ready to talk. And meanwhile, I had prepped for probably like 2 or 3 hours on precisely what questions I was going to ask and where the conversation was going to go. And then we didn't talk about it before hitting record.
No.
So I was just like, here we go.
Yeah.
And
which is, to a certain extent, is still a little bit, I mean, I prep more now. And I think, we've had a good, healthy tension in that of prep versus where does the conversation go? Scripted questions versus what if we go off into a spot that we never thought, that we were going to be in? What if we don't get to ask some of the questions that we're super excited about because we get into something else?
Yep.
And you've made me read books and read up on people and learn who people are and do all these kind of, which is great. It just, Yeah, I've learned a ton. I've learned a ton about those people. I've learned a ton from you. And we've had so many guests say, "Hey, you guys have done a great job really preparing. Like, go on a lot of podcasts, and you guys do great." So, um, yeah, there's a different dynamic there. And then I agree. I don't like to affirm you, but I will affirm you. It has been a fun year. I think that in that you've done a great job. It's been fun to see the people that you've brought on and the relationships that you have. And yeah, I mean, honestly, the highlight in that too is just we have a podcast.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Like, I don't really know how to say it other than that, of like, oh, we have a podcast that people sometimes listen to. Like, if you would have told me at the beginning of the year, hey, you're gonna have a few hundred subscribers, I'd be like, yeah, you my expectations got thrown off because mostly just like Instagram started so well. And I was like, oh my gosh. So it's not that I think that it's a failure now. It's, if you would have told me day one, hey, you got a few hundred people on YouTube, you got some Instagram followers, you've got some people on TikTok, and you actually got people listening on, Spotify and Apple Podcasts and, iHeartRadio, whoever they are.
We love you, iHeartRadio. Please
Yeah,
stay.
I
Please
would have
don't
been like,
go.
yeah, I would have been like, no, like, who's going to listen to us? And I still
Right.
sometimes wonder who's going to listen to us, but people, tell me all the time, not all the time, but on occasion, I guess. Hey, I love, hearing about, tiny fires inside your house, for Ellery May. I'm like, wait, you listen to me blabber about my wife's candle company and like you listen to
Yeah.
our podcast? Yeah, we like it. So, anyways, some of my highlights, long-winded answer.
Oh, it's great. It's great. When you reflect on maybe one of your favorite interviews, is there anyone who just immediately comes to mind like, man, that was a really insightful interview or was really fun?
Gosh.
Um,
That's a tough question because I feel like there were so many that were really good. Like, I feel like I was really surprised with James from Happy. Um,
yeah.
uh, I'm getting his name right. I didn't just
Yeah,
mess that up,
James
did I?
Lawrence. Yeah, that
Yeah,
episode
James Lawrence.
slapped.
Okay,
It was
yeah.
awesome.
Well, it was like I didn't even know really much about him. You know, um, I knew a little bit, and he just came on and just was really fun. That was one of my, favorite, like, probably surprise episodes. I'm gonna go sentimental this year and be like my dad. I mean, I know a lot of his content,
That's great.
but super close with him,
Big
and
takeaway from the episode with your dad was just the term durability. Like I feel
mm,
like he put a word to something that I felt growing in myself as I launched my company. And like all self-confidence was like eroded and rebuilt on a daily basis. It's like
mm,
you wake up and you say, I'm an idiot. I hate myself. This was a horrible idea. And then by the end of the day, you're like, oh, hey, this actually kind of worked. And then the next day you wake up and you're like, oh, what have I done? Like, I'm not going to make any money today. And
mhm,
then you close a new client or something happens and it's a win and you're like, oh, I'm going to do this again tomorrow. And it's like every day is like this yo-yo.
mm,
And your dad, using that term durability, I was like, yes, like that is the muscle I'm trying to build in this season of my career and the season of my business. And I feel like our generation in particular needs to build some durability muscles as it relates to life and work.
mm,
And we just, we were probably brought up with a certain level of comfort and ease in a lot of areas of life that maybe, our parents and particularly our grandparents, didn't have. And so yeah, I love that episode.
yeah,
And there was a lot of insight drawn out of our time with them.
it's true. It's true. Durability, persistence, man. Keep moving forward. What about you? What was that episode that stands out?
Well, James, the one with James was good. So I had a lot of fun doing that. I had a lot of fun with Brandon Schaefer. He's been a
Mm,
longtime mentor of mine, founder of Five Capitals, where, I've done a lot of development and training. And so, and just him being him and being so faith forward. And like, he quoted like 18 Bible verses, which for some listeners is probably spot on. And other listeners are probably like, whoa, I didn't know this was a religious thing.
mhm,
And so I just loved that. Brandon was so Brandon, um, and I really derived a lot of joy out of getting to have that conversation because, when I met Brandon in 2014, 2015, and I asked him if I could get coaching, and I asked him, if I could become a coach, it's just like this whole full circle thing where like I have a consultancy now, and I have a podcast, and I'm interviewing Brandon, who's been such a key part of my development. And so that was really fun. Corey Carlson, I could put in that same category, because he's someone who does a lot of executive coaching for me, and he and I work together on a lot of client facing projects. And so it's really fun to get to do that. I have some ones kind of in the pipeline right now that I've been planning and prepping for, and talking to them about, that I'm really excited for season 2, because I think we're going to expose our audience to some really interesting people that, otherwise aren't like on YouTube making videos all the time, but they have a lot of good stuff to say. And so I'm really looking forward to, now that I kind of know what I'm doing a little bit, and I'm kind of like, okay, this is how this works. I think that season 2 is going to be dope. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun. So, reflecting, Brandon, super fun. Corey, super fun. But looking into the future, like, I feel like we're just still warming up. So,
yeah. And for those of you non-millennials, dope means really good. Did
I say dope?
Yeah, he said dope, which I love.
Cool.
I haven't heard that in a while. It's going to be dope, man. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's good episodes. What? Anything else you're excited about going into 2025 for season 2?
Yeah. I think that there are some specifics that I'm really curious about, kind of looking into. So think, the conversations we had with Chad Brown, Adrian Kaler, Dan Tocchini, they have a way of thinking about the inner workings of the mind of a leader, of their psychology, that I think is really interesting. I think we're going to probably look for opportunities to explore that further. I do a lot of my work in servant leadership with my Chick-fil-A background. So I think there's a lot of servant leadership conversations we can have that are super interesting. I think that there are some global leaders that are doing work outside of the US that you have a lot of exposure to. I have exposure to some of them. And I think bringing them in, kind of like the Michael Christensen episode, he's working heavily with the team in France, and bringing to bear leadership styles and philosophies that maybe aren't as common in the US, or just not the way that the personality of our nation approaches leadership. I think that can really enhance our thinking. And so I'm looking forward to bringing some of those more international perspectives in. And I think that we've, because of our network, have had a lot of kind of Chick-fil-A conversations, just because we share that background. And I'm looking forward to continuing to have those, but also just to expanding to some other companies that we're familiar with and have good relationships in. And people can really take the cultures of those companies and inform our listeners with just different ways of thinking. And so that's what I would say I'm excited for, just different types of perspective.
Yeah. That's great, man. Yeah, it is. It's gonna be a fun year. It's gonna be a fun year. I feel like, already have a pretty good list sorted of some people for this next year to be learning from, and different backgrounds and perspectives. And every guest that we've had, I have learned from, which is really exciting thinking about next year. And I am in particularly probably excited for us to continue to find out a little bit more. You mentioned this earlier, like our voice.
Yeah.
We have, talked about it and talked about our core competencies and how we kind of approach it. But I think just continuing to figure out, how does the daily leader best serve those that are listening to us? How do we leverage that in a really good way that is good for us and it's good for our listeners, and I'm also excited, maybe next year will be the year the wives actually listen to the podcast for the first time ever. I'm not holding.
I want to believe.
but
I want to believe.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not. They would be bored and on Instagram in about 2 minutes.
Yep.
So, but yeah, it's been a great year, man. It's been a great year. Any parting words you want to leave our listeners with?
You know, the only thing that I was really thinking about from an encouragement or like a be inspiring, rah standpoint is just like, look, if you have an idea, just do it, just try. And if there's any credit that's due us, it would just be, hey, we had an idea and we went for it. And I think about like, what would the world look like if there was no Joe Rogan, no Huberman Labs, no Chris Williamson, no Tim Ferriss? You could insert a bunch of other names in there, of people who are podcasting and kind of out in
all
the
on the
content
same
creation
level
world.
We're on that level too. So anyways, continue.
Right. Yeah. Well, we have to give them something to aspire to.
Sure.
And so I just think it's like it's just worth trying. It's worth trying whatever you feel an ambition for. And it's worth failing. If we never make a podcast again, I still feel like, man, that was a really great learning experience. And I think that was valuable for a handful of people who were consistent in listening. And hopefully we had a positive influence on their life and their leadership. And more importantly, the people that they serve, right? They were actually better leaders because they got exposure to some of the folks we interviewed and they learned some things. So go for it, do it, fail hard, whatever it is you need to do. That's my encouragement.
Fail hard is a good one. I like that. If you're going to go, fail hard, man. Just give it, it's, you've spent enough time thinking, now go do, you've thought it out. So just go do it. Or if you haven't, just go start to think about it and then go do it. But those are some good words, Bradley. Those are some good words. Well, man, we should probably land this plane, let people get on with their days, their nights, their mornings, whenever they're listening, all those good things. And
I love it.
It's kind of our sign off for the year. It's almost Christmas. Kind of crazy. So,
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year
to each of you who've listened. We love you.
Yep.
And we'll talk again next year.
We will.